feedback favorites. I just wanted to give a little bit of self-reflection about what this workspace is, kind of what descriptive feedback means to me, what it means to the students, and why it is critical that we give students the most descriptive, appropriate feedback possible, especially knowing the different situations and the kind of feedback that the students need in given the appropriate task. So that first of all, this kind of layout of the workspace is arranged based on we're starting with our self pre-assessment, just like we would pre-assess any students. It's good for us as professionals to self-assess where we are and in order to get an idea of where we want to go in the end. And a lot of this was done with the end in mind and knowing what I want my students to be able to do, and then assessing them periodically throughout the way. All right, so in our workspace here, we can see that I've included, like I said, the self pre-assessment, and then we have why feedback is important. I think this gives you a lot of resources to think about as you approach feedback and give students opportunities for different styles of assessment. I included a podcast conversation from how we would adapt if we didn't have a grade book, we didn't have grades, because feedback is really the ultimate more important than grades themselves, because it lets students know what they need to how they need to adjust, what they need to learn from in growing forward. This is kind of like the transcript from that podcast. This is a wonderful video here that kind of explains the importance of feedback and providing student-specific feedback. Down in this area, I did some different guidelines for feedback. One of my favorite images is this ladder here. And I use this with the students themselves to give them some structure through the feedback. So it starts with clarifying feedback, stage 1, then moves up to value feedback, stage 2, then concern, which is stage 3, and then stage 4 is suggestions for further response. So this kind of gives students a structure to the feedback that they're giving and some guidelines, because they need some structure and guidelines for whenever they're starting to give feedback, so that they're able to give the most appropriate feedback to each other, because otherwise they could just be saying whatever, but we want them to be in line with what they're seeing. I included a quote here from one of my students who I think has a really good understanding of feedback and the importance of it. And then up above here, I included feedback possibilities. The greatest thing about technology is the endless possibilities of feedback and the different ways that we can approach it. I started with a very simple right here. Is in SmartAmp. It is the assessment feature. You can kind of go numerous ways with that. You could do just a basic like question answer, multiple choice. You could do response. SmartAmp really gives you the opportunities to include various levels of assessments and feedback. You could include images of a text, have the students read it, highlight a response, and then do a written response based off of that. You could include a video to go along with the text and comparing them. And then it gives you the opportunity to visit their workspace and see their work. One of my favorite things with SmartAmp is using it for math and asking them to write down the process of solving math problems effectively, and it gives me opportunity to see their work. I can also use the chat feature to chat with the students and give them feedback that way while they're working on it without any disruption. So you could have a quiet class, personal chat them, and give them something specific to work on. I think being specific with the feedback is critical, so that they can kind of zero in on what they're doing. So here we go. I had to do a little refresh there. Moving up to here. Then some other opportunities such as Kahoot, which is a cool thing that the kids love to do, which is interactive. They can do it in teams or with partners. Again, you're still going to get instant feedback based on the result of if they got the question right or wrong. Podcasting to personalized feedback. This was a really cool little video I found on Teaching Channel. I haven't done this yet, but I'm going to in the future. Just a different opportunity for feedback from students, to students from teacher. Here's another little resource about how to provide students with meaningful, personalized feedback. So whenever we talk about personal learning, it's important to think about personal feedbacks. That way each student can grow individually and on their own personal level. And then of course Google Form has endless possibilities with instant feedback quizzes. I use Google Form a lot with math in combination with, they solve the problem, they look to see if they got the right answer. If they did, good. If not, then they kind of need to go back and revisit their work and what they're doing. So that's kind of how this is laid out. And then I also wanted to include classroom examples that we have done this year. So this is basically a connection together. I use the grass model for this. It's a playground problem. There's a problem with erosion on our playground, and this is kind of the work template the kids are doing. Here's the success criteria, and then here's some example of some conferencing discussions that I had with students. So again, that's another form of feedback. And then down here we have marking period 3, reflection to feedback. So this is like a really large feedback criteria. This was used in SmartAmp, embedding different forms of assessment and then reflecting on each other. So you're going to have multiple forms of feedback that are important, such as obviously teacher to student, but it's important that you get student to teacher feedback as well. I do a Google form student reflection at the end of each marking period to give me feedback on what I need to improve on to make the learning experience better for them and more appropriate for them. They also need to have feedback for each other, so peer-to-peer feedback, and that seems to be the one that they really like, is hearing what their classmates have to say about how they are doing and what they're working on. Over here, down here, this is a little bit more description of the peer feedback ladder and a way to go about that. And then over here, where you see it says text to musical, that is just a different activity that we did. Overall, the students are actually going to turn their book club books into a musical, which with student-made music, lyrics, and then they're going to do some acting to go along with it. And along the way to get to that, I gave them the opportunity to that was the end in mind. But then through that, they've done numerous opportunities for me to assess them and provide them feedback, such as just this little discussion on Google Classroom. While working through it, they did a story map, and then they wrote a summary to go along with that. So I think it's important to remember that students need clear, descriptive feedback in order to be successful students. As Bill Gates said, we all need people who will give us feedback, and that's how we improve. So the common phrase I like to use with my students is fail forward, to learn from your mistakes, and as long as we give them clear, descriptive feedback, that is something that they can do.